So, welcome to the Garmin 430. We'll be using this 430 trainer, downloadable from Garmin, for overview today. Intended primarily for those of you who haven't dealt with the 430 before. So as you can see right now, it's telling us to press in on the power comm volume knob to power it on. So we'll do that. Usually in the aircraft, this turns on with the main master switch. So it's going to run through its self-checks. This is pretty much exactly the way the real one will respond. So the first thing you get to that you have to actually do something with is it's telling you that we've got some expired databases. Obstacle and aviation databases are expired. If you're flying IFR, you'll need to verify, if you have an expired database, you'll need to verify with the supplement pertaining to your particular unit whether it's okay to fly with it, whether you have to verify the waypoints, or whether it has to be up to date to fly with it. If you're flying VFR, just be aware that things may change over time. So the airport identifier may have changed, the runway numbering may have changed, the frequencies, especially for untowered fields, may have changed. So you'll need to verify anything you get out of the Garmin database before using it. So we'll go over here and... Okay. So one thing you can't see is we actually do have an HSI for this device. So what you would actually see is if you looked at the HSI, CDI, you should see these particular indications. This is also telling you what your OBS is currently set on. So if I go over here to our OBS and change it, well, it's not letting me change it. Anyway, you would see these numbers changing. So you can also set full fuel if you know your fuel is full. Obviously this doesn't know how big our fuel tanks are. Anyway, go forward to OK, hit enter there. So you briefly saw the view of the current GPS status. And then it brings you to the main nav, the standard nav page. So we'll talk about what each of these buttons and functions does. So this is your comm volume. This sets the volume you will hear for the communications receiver. If you press in on it briefly, it will unsquelch and resquelch the comm receiver so you can hear weak signals. When it's receiving in the real plane, right here next to comm, you'll see an RX. Here next to VLOC, if you push for ID, you'll see an ID. So these are your flip-flops, just like a standard radio. These will flip-flop the standby into the primary frequency. So the white ones are active. The blue one, or reverse video one, is telling you, in this case, if you turn this knob, that's the frequency it's going to change. The outer knob changes megahertz. The inner knob only changes kilohertz. So you notice it wraps around but doesn't change the megahertz value. If you need to change the VOR localizer frequency, you push in on this button. There we go. And you can now use the small knob to change kilohertz there, and the large knob to change megahertz there. Without any touching of this, after a bit, it'll revert back to here as the active frequency when you edit with the knob. Or you can push it again and it will go back. So along the bottom we have some keys. These are not technically soft keys because they only ever do one function generally. The CDI button will change your CDI output from either GPS to VOR, and back to GPS. OBS, if we have an active waypoint, will let us change from a navigation mode to that waypoint to using it as a reference for a navigation path. That'll make more sense in a couple minutes. Message will show any active messages. Flight plan brings up your flight plan page. We'll enter a flight plan here in a bit. Procedure sets the system up to actually load an IFR approach procedure. The range buttons over here control the display here. Down puts you closer to the ground, which means everything's bigger. Up, further away, everything's smaller. Direct will let you set where you're going directly if you don't have a full flight plan entered. Menu pulls up a menu for the current page you're on. So this is all our menu options for this page. Most keys, you press them again, and they go away. You can also usually push clear to make them go away. If you hold clear, it returns you to the main nav page, which is the first page of navigation. And enter is used to select items. So down here at the bottom, it tells us we're in the nav page group. The little filled in rectangle tells us we're on the first page. With nothing blinking on this screen, the small knob on this right side changes the page, terrain, current information on our waypoint, little screen with position information should you need it, current GPS status, and vertical navigation. These may vary based on what peripherals you have attached to your 430 and which software revision. The large knob switches us through page groups. So nav was first, the waypoint page. So waypoints, you have a couple pages with information on your current airport. You have an intersection lookup page. You have an NDB lookup page. You have a VOR lookup page, and you have a user waypoint page, which we'll come back to, but is the most common one you'll be seeing a lot of doing search flying. One more click on the big knob takes us to the auxiliary pages. These are sort of random things that the GPS can do for you. So let's say we actually wanted to do trip planning. Well, if we use the small knob, we just go to the next page. So what we do is we push in on this knob to get a cursor. As I said earlier, if this is blinking, then it means something different than when it's not. So now that it's blinking, the big knob changes which thing is blinking. The small knob on this page actually does the same, but it doesn't always do the same. So let's go to trip planning, push enter. So this lets us enter some trip planning information, and if you wanted to, it would give you estimated times. So once again, the big knob will move this blinking selection, and now that we're in here, if we push the small knob, it's going to want to change what's under the blinking spot. So here we have a K. Once again, to move it, big knob. Let's use A. See if there's an ABC airport. Nope, no airport. That's okay. Anyway, press clear a few times. Now you notice it's not actually doing anything here. So we can have two options. We can escape this by holding down clear, or we can turn off the cursor by pressing in on the cursor knob and continue moving along. And one more press in on the cursor will return these knobs to their default status of changing pages and page groups. So the next page group is the nearest page group. The easiest way to get to this, if there's nothing blinking, is grab the large knob, twist it all the way to the right. Just twist it until you get here. This shows us immediately what our nearest 3 airports are. If we twist the small knob, it'll also tell us nearest intersections, nearest NDBs, nearest VORs, nearest user waypoints, nearest frequency for center, nearest flight service frequency, and nearest airspace if it's in the database. So, we're done with all this. We're just going to hold the clear button to go back to the main page. So, one of the first things you're going to have to do, we've already showed over here on the left how to enter a frequency. Let's see the other way, another way to enter a frequency. So, we go over here to the waypoint page. We're all the way to the right. We need to go back to our airport. So, it's already pulled up the airport we're sitting at. 1 to the right will give us runway information. 2 to the right gives us the frequency page. Press in to turn on the blinking cursor. Use the large knob to select what you want to enter. And then when you press enter, this frequency will be copied into this standby frequency location. So it's changed to 125.45. Now we can use flip-flop, or the pilot can use flip-flop, to bring this to the active position. AWAS is actually the same frequency, so we can ignore that. Clearance, and let's say we want ground on standby. So, now this radio is set up. With the ATIS, we can listen to that, and then when the pilot's ready, he can flip-flop and call ground. So, the same thing actually works if you're on the pages for a VOR. If we push in, hit enter here, even without this being highlighted, it will still put it, into the VOR standby frequency position here. And once again, all you have to do is hit flip-flop. For some reason it's making me click twice. You only have to push these buttons once. And now we are headed to the VOR in Auckland, New Zealand. So, for flight planning, we'll start from the default nav page. Go to the flight plan page by pushing the flight plan button. It's helpfully already figured out that we're at Gillespie Field in San Diego. So, we'll push in on the cursor button, get us our blinking cursor, turn the small knob. You notice it defaults to K. In this case, we're actually going to go to Lima 08 L. We start going backwards for things before A. 0. So, our first stop on our flight plan is Borrego Valley. We'll enter this. Then we were told we're going to go to Thermal. KTRM. Thermal, Palm Springs area. Then after Thermal, we were told to fly to the Shady intersection. So let's enter that, which is S H A D Shady, and then on to Blythe. This is really basically a straight line, but we're doing this for BLH. And we're done with entering our flight plan. So push in on the cursor button. Since it knows we're at Gillespie right now, it's automatically set up our first leg here. And off the screen, we'll actually increase our speed so that we're actually navigating along this path in the trainer. So you can now see on the little map that we're now navigating to the Lima 08 waypoint. On a heading, the desired track is 039 magnetic. Our current track is changing to that, and it's 41.3 nautical miles. So while it's doing this, we'll let it go this way for a minute. The clear button on this page can also be used to determine how much is shown. -1 means there's one level of clutter removed. So -2, we're down to just airports. -3, we're seeing primarily only airports on our flight plan. And, back to full, which includes some things like names of places. These are some reservoirs. Oh, now it's warning us that we're going to run into terrain. So we need to increase our altitude. Fortunately, in the trainer, this is fairly easy. We'll just hold down the up button until we're above terrain. This is a little tricky. Whoops. But if you hit enter, it shows you the terrain page. So yellow is close to your altitude. Red is, I believe, within 100 feet or above your altitude. So 100 feet below you and up. So this is simulating climbing, so hopefully we'll outclimb the terrain, or the simulator will hit it. Anyway, but we're done with this. This is just one of the nav pages, so we can once again change the small knob to go back. So we're well on our way to Lima 08. 600 knots over the ground. Should be in there in about 3 minutes. So we're still, a little closer to our destination. But what we realized is, the pilot's been listening to the second radio tuned to 121.5, and we noticed that there is an ELT going off. So we want to mark that position. So the fastest way is to go back to this page and simply press in on the button. The map pointer is left at the position you were when you pushed in. So you notice the plane is getting further away from us, but the pointer hasn't moved. You can then copy down this location, or we can make a mark there. If we just hit enter, it gives us the next user waypoint number. Can hit enter again. Now we have a marker. So now we're done with the pointer. We can turn that back off. And let's say we need to look up that waypoint. One click on the big knob to the waypoint page. Turn all the way to the right, and you'll get the user waypoint page. In this case, we only have the one, but you can read off this information. Now let's say we're done with this. Press the menu button, use the small knob to select delete, and hit delete. Not currently used. Great. It's going to be deleted. If this is part of a flight plan, it won't let you delete it. So you have to remove it from the flight plan before you delete any user waypoints. So switch back here. We're almost all the way to Lima 08 Borrego. But now, as we get closer, they tell us, oh, yeah, don't bother flying over or even landing at Borrego. Just go straight to thermal. Let's slow down our virtual plane when we do this. So we hit direct. Well, we want to go to the next one. We could enter thermal here, KTRM, and hit enter and activate it. Or we can use the big knob to go down to flight plan here. Turn the small knob, and it shows you the points in our flight plan. So there's thermal, there's shady. We just want to go to thermal. Hit enter. Now it's showing us, do you want to activate this? Yes. Okay. So now we're going from our present position over to directly to thermal. So the other thing you occasionally need to do is to activate a leg of your flight plan. So if we look here, earlier there was a kind of a U shape between the first waypoint, KSE, and Lima 08, indicating that a leg or a route between two places were active. The arrow here is telling us we're just going direct to this place. So what we can do here from the flight plan page, push in for the cursor. Once again, use the big knob to select. We want to activate the leg between thermal and shady. Once shady is selected, you select the second waypoint. Hit menu. Activate leg is the first thing selected. Activate thermal to shady. So now, if we zoom out, what we'll see is from thermal here to the shady intersection somewhere over here is now active. And it's going to be navigating us to, in this case, probably to thermal still, or to intercept somewhere along that active leg. So while we're headed over there, we're going to clean up some things in the flight plan. You wouldn't normally do this, but for the next couple steps, we want to do something slightly different. So go to KSEE, hit clear, hit enter, go to Lima 08, hit clear, hit enter. Okay, so now we have a 3-waypoint flight plan. Thermal to Blythe via the shady intersection. And thermal to shady is the active leg. Push flight plan so you can see it just starting to crop up over here. Speed up our plane for a little while. So what you might do if you're doing a route search, you might put in the expected route of the pilot of the plane you're searching for into a flight plan. And then, you would fly this route, just like we're having the autopilot do right now. So, we're just finishing up our flight from Shady to Blythe. Now, we don't have anything in the flight plan after this. So nothing's really going to happen. It's just going to keep flying the same heading on this magical autopilot. Well, let's say we reach the end and we realize, okay, well, we want the other guy seeing out each window, so we're just going to flip right around and fly it again. Go into flight plan. Just hit menu. The second option, invert flight plan. Enter. Now you notice it's immediately activated Blythe to Shady. And if we go back to our main page, you see our little airplane starting to turn around. And it'll fly this back the other way. Well, let's tell the airplane to stop for a second. Well, what if instead of just flying back, we actually want to offset from our track? We can do that here. Back on the flight plan page. Back on menu. You notice this little bar isn't all the way filled, so there's more options down here. Once again, turning the big knob to choose which option. Parallel track. Press enter. Use the small knob to set your offset. So we're going to go 2 miles to the right of the current track, which will put us north of the line from Blythe back to thermal. Right. Enter. You notice there's a little dash P that says, hey, this is a parallel track. If we go back to our flight plan, you'll notice here's our original track. Well, our original flight plan path. Here's this new one 2 miles to the right, or in this case, 2 miles to the north. So if we were to increase our speed, one little trick here is it's going to try and go to Shady, because it had already activated that leg down here. So what you might want to do is go direct, go back to Blythe, and it lost our parallel track. So it may not always work the way you expect. So basically though, do make sure that you're far enough away from your first waypoint, or make sure you're going to your second waypoint before you try and go do this navigation. So there's some caveats. Play with it. Make sure it works right for what you're doing. So we mentioned earlier how you could enter a user waypoint by using this map page. We'll let it fly around here. The other thing you can do with this cursor is you can move it around by using the small knob to go up and down, the big knob to go left and right. And to figure out distances from your aircraft, bearings, and this is the latitude and longitude of where the pointer is. As we mentioned earlier, if you just want a continuous readout of latitude and longitude of your aircraft, you can turn this small knob and it'll give you kind of, an overview of what the GPS is seeing. So, another thing that's fairly common is, well, we need to put in the corner points of our grid. Well, the first thing you do is go to the waypoint page. We'll pretend we started way over here. So go to user waypoints. Press in. Let's just call this one, 0. Let's just call it A, 0A. Now, we gave it a name. It immediately went, here's where you are right when I hit enter, this is where you are. But we want to enter our own coordinates. So this whole thing is selected. Use the small knob to tell it we want to edit that. So we'll make it 3830. So remember, this is degrees, minutes, decimal minutes. And 114, 45, 0. Remember, big knob changes position. 2, 1, 0. And obviously, if you're doing a grid, you would enter all 4 corners. Make sure you use a name that you know. Talk to the people in charge of your aircraft if they want you to clean up your user waypoints when you're done. You probably will at the end of your sortie. So we can hit enter, or we can toggle off the cursor and move over to create. And now here's our little user waypoint. We go back to our flight plan, and we can just add this to the end. Big knob, big knob, big knob. Small knob to start changing things. Go down to 0. A. So we're going to fly from Blythe to Shady to Thermal to 0A. Well, that wasn't quite right. We just got that coordinate. Let's go direct instead. So, same procedure. Move down to flight plan. 0A. Activate it. This is, telling us, well, you need to make a left turn. And if we go look over here on the display. It's even depicting a nice turn for us. And there's our little corner waypoint of whichever grid we happen to be close to at this time. So, we have a direct line from somewhere to our waypoint at 0A. Well, if we want to fly, directly north and south from that, press in on OBS, and you don't see this here, but there's a CDI head. Which we can move to 090, or actually north-south. So let's go to 180. So there is your magnetic north-south line off of our corner point. And now we could go up here, intersect it, fly down here, and then maybe, okay, we've flown 09 or 180. Let's change it to 235. And then fly that one, and then continue changing and following. So that's how you use OBS mode in the simplest manner. It basically turns whatever waypoint you can go direct to into its own little VOR type station. So another thing you can do if you have an active leg is instead of following, say, your CDI directly, you can follow the offset from your CDI information. So if we turn the small knob here, speed us up some here, 1.4, and now if we were to actually change so our heading is aligned with our course, we should be able to parallel, 1.5. And you can do this with any flight plan leg, or rather, any leg. So you notice we're now desired track of 270, current track of 090. So we're kind of going backwards, but we're going to stay roughly at this deviation from the course. So you can use this to go, say a mile from a leg, and then 2 miles from a leg, and 3 miles from a leg. It's not quite as easy as some of the other ways you could fly a search grid, but you can use this to give you a little bit of assistance. And that concludes our very, very brief introduction to the Garmin 430.